All right, this is a breakdown on how to do Warrior 2. Now, before we get into whether or not you should bend into the front knee or where the foot should be placed, let's talk about the purpose of the pose. Now, functionally, the purpose of the pose is to stretch out the inner thigh, the adductor of the back leg. Not so much the hamstring, not so much the hip flexor, the adductor. The secondary purpose is to build up a little bit of strength in the front leg, especially the quad. So in order to do that, we're going to start out with the legs about arm's length apart, maybe a little bit shorter. And you don't necessarily need to go heel to arch. It can be heel to heel. That's going to depend on your pelvis and how far you can abduct your leg away from midline. So if you try to point your hips directly out to the side, what tends to happen is you find a bit of compensation in the front knee, and that's where you get the knee caving in and the collapsing of the arch in the front foot. So turning the hips out to the side, if you lack that range of motion, then you'll see the knee caving in like so and the arch dropping in like that, which is why you hear teachers say externally rotate the leg. But this isn't about external rotation. This is about abduction. So now that we got that covered, let's come back into the posture. And before you start getting into the posture, I prefer not getting into this very passively. If you're in the beginning of your practice, this is going to feel pretty good, and a passive stretch is going to target the muscle. As you get a little bit more advanced and you can get into the pose a little bit deeper, what tends to happen is you're no longer stretching out the muscle, but you're starting to get into the capsule of the hip. So to bring it back into the muscle, what you want is to start out with the leg straight like so and provide an isometric engagement where you're squeezing the legs together. And when you do that, you'll start to notice that the inner thigh is engaged as well as a bit of the hamstring. And then from here, you can stick your arms out to the sides and start to bend into the front knee while the hips are facing diagonally. You're only going to go as far as your knee doesn't cave in and you don't start to compensate. All right. So bending into the front knee, how far you bend into the front knee depends on whether or not you lose the engagement in the back adductor. If you're starting to feel like you're losing it, ease up out of the bend in the front leg and come back to squeezing the legs together. And maybe your Warrior 2 looks like this, and that's totally fine. Now, to get into the back foot, whether or not your back foot should be pointing slightly in or out to the side. If your back foot is pointing slightly in, it's going to be harder to point the hips out to the side, as well as that's going to start to stretch the hip flexor more than the adductor. So I like to point the foot directly out to the side, and that way you can start to stretch out into that inner thigh here. All right, so take the arms out, gaze comes right over the middle finger, and then slowly start to bend into that front knee. All right, give that a try.